Good morning, all the viewers that are tuned in. We appreciate you tuning in and being a part of our 11:11. Today we got Dave Vanderpool with us today, and he's going to share a little recap, and after the recap, he is going to, he'll tell you what he's going to do. How about that, Dave?
That sounds good.
All right, I'm just going to turn it over to you, but I do want to say I appreciate Johnny Omoki and Son being a part of this series of messages, this series of information, and I just thank you, Dave, for being a part of it, and all your other experts that came and was a part of it. I just cannot say it enough.
Well,
we appreciate you.
We appreciate your comments too. Thanks for the invitation to come and share. And I think for us as a funeral home, it's nice to be invited to a beautiful place like this and to share and to educate and to just hopefully just help people make some decisions. It's a delicate conversation. It's a delicate topic. It's not everybody's favorite topic. And for those of you all who have joined us all the way from back April the 8th is when we started this. So we've been talking about this a lot. And so it's just good to have the time with you folks. You did ask me to recap, and I can't take a lot of time because I want to get to the topic at hand for today. But we went back all the way to April the 8th, as I said, and the very first thing that we talked about was sort of the question, why even go there in the first place? And we kind of equated that with if maybe you were running around as a teenager and you went somewhere you weren't supposed to and you got in trouble and your mom maybe caught you, and she said, well, Davy, and that's what my mom used to call me when I was a kid, Davy, why did you even go there in the first place? As in, I knew that it was maybe not the right place to go to. I think that's the way society is with this kind of a conversation a lot of times. It's like, why do you even want to go there in the first place? You're talking about death. Somebody else can take care of that. Why even spend some time doing that? So that's how we kicked it off at the beginning. And we really focused on the issues of stewardship and ownership and a peace of mind, that when we dive into this topic and we begin to really focus on some of the things for us, that really is a good place to go. We followed up the next week with the decision of disposition, and we talked briefly about the three main options that folks have. Of course, traditional arrangements is where the body stays intact, is usually buried in a cemetery or placed in a mausoleum. We talked about cremation and all the different options with cremation. And then we talked a little bit about anatomical donation, and that's for folks that want to do something good for others, or for maybe law enforcement, or maybe for doctors or dentists and even funeral directors, and that's where people would actually give of their whole entire body for some type of a study. The next session was entitled What I Want and How I Want It, and it was a big discussion about all of the wishes and preferences that we might have. Everything from music to clothing to jewelry to maybe a minister to what cemetery, whether you want things to be public or private, all of these different options that we have. And so we talked about that. Then we went into a session on funerals and finances. We talked about the importance of a general price list and how financing works, what terms of payments maybe that there are, how the funeral contract is put together, services and merchandise and cash advances. And so that's what was summarized with that, how you pay with life insurance and prepaying and all those sorts of things. And then the last session was the deadly duty list, and that's where Candy had shared the long list, or a portion of the long list of things that have to be done, from contacting Social Security, closing out bank accounts. It could be veterans benefits that maybe have to be delved into, canceling a cell phone plan. All of those things are just some of the deadly duty lists. So that's what we shared over the last several weeks. And originally I think we had talked about maybe doing an open forum for this final thing, but Pastor Gary and I talked a little bit, and we thought maybe we would end things on something that I came up with about a month ago when I spoke with another group, and I came up with funeral director myths. And there's some truth to this, And you'll understand where I'm going with this, but at the same time, it also gives us an opportunity, maybe in some ways in a humorous way, to dive into some of the things that are important about funeral service. So before I go on, maybe just so I don't forget at the end, if ever any of you have questions for a funeral director, it does not mean you have to use our funeral home. I think we've been very clear that these discussions have been for everybody. It doesn't matter color, it doesn't matter economic status, it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what funeral home you choose. This is education that can be for everybody. And please feel free to call on us if you'd like. I'm Dave, John M. Oakey and Son in Salem. We're more than happy to help you with anything ever. And you can always extend that to your folks here at Richfield. So what are some of these myths? This is kind of a neat little list that I came up fairly quickly as I started thinking about different things that funeral directors are kind of approached with. And some of these are serious and some of them are more humorous. So the first one that I have on here is funeral directors are required by law. And that's actually a myth. The Code of Virginia actually allows folks to move through a funeral process without using a funeral director. Now, there would be some things you would not be able to do, like, for example, embalming. Embalming is something that requires a licensed funeral director, so you would not be able to embalm. There may be some difficulties with maybe getting a death certificate filed or something like that, but if you are a person that just really doesn't want to use a funeral home, then you can do that. You have to talk with the hospital maybe on the release of a body in a station wagon, for example, that belongs to you, but it is doable. It is doable. So I always wanted to point that out. The second thing here, this is a myth, that funeral directors are dull, boring, solemn, morbid, and freaky. I think sometimes, Pastor Gary, I think the outside world sort of sees us that way, that we're not energetic people, we're not fun to hang around with. We don't like to be sociable. We walk around with our hands down by our sides, kind of looking down and speaking slowly. I can't tell you, that's the furthest from the truth. It really, truly is. We are a fun group of people, and we are energetic. We know how to maybe turn that off or use our discernment with those things, but we're fun people. This is another myth. Funeral directors are just sitting around waiting for the next call. I think in the outside world, sometimes folks feel like that all we do is direct a funeral, and then that's it. And Pastor Gary and I were talking before we went live with this about our days, and I was sharing with him the different things that's on the plate today for the funeral home, and there's hardly time to even grab some lunch. And that's just the way it is. It's not like that every single day. But most days are really, really busy and really, really full. And so we are not, in spite of what folks think, we are not just sitting around just kind of twiddling our thumbs and waiting for that phone to ring. Sometimes we wish that the phone wouldn't ring. And that's just how it is. Another myth is that funeral directors can single-handedly wait on every family. I love when a family calls, they've experienced a death, and they ask specifically for a director. They maybe used that director in the past, or maybe they've been referred to that director by somebody that they care for, that they've had previous experience. We absolutely love that. But when it really comes down to it, there is no way that, say, for me, example, that I can wait on every single family. There's just no way. We try to not overwhelm ourselves really with more than 3 families at a time. There's just so much that's poured into each family, and we want every family to feel as if they're the only family that we are dealing with, and very often that's not the case. But all funeral homes have great staff, and there are multiple people that can serve families just tremendously well. And we all do the same thing. Our personalities are maybe a little bit different, but there's just no way. In order to give a family the dedication and the time and the service that they really deserve and that they're paying for, it's just impossible for just one of us to be able to wait on every single family. Another myth is that funeral directors love walk-ins. And by walk-in, I mean that it's just somebody that's maybe driving down the road. This wouldn't really happen, but they just happen to be driving by the funeral home and think, you know what, let's go in there and talk to somebody today. Probably not going to happen that way. So often, though, there are folks that do come in that haven't made an appointment. We do our very best to accommodate that, just as any funeral home would. But it does make things difficult. And so we are not in love with the idea of somebody just walking in. Just like everything else you would do, from getting your hair cut, although don't need an appointment for that, but when you go to the doctor, you make an appointment. You know, when you go to visit someone in the professional world, you make an appointment. And we do. We love it when people call us, and so that we can schedule it. We don't want all of our directors to be out on a service or tied up with other things, so appointments are great. Another myth and a misconception I think that's out there is that funeral directors earn commission on at-need arrangements. Now, in a pre-arrangement situation, it's a little bit different because there's insurance that's involved there. But in an at-need situation, and by at-need I mean when there has been a death that has occurred, it does not matter what folks choose on a casket. It doesn't matter if they do something that's a simple cremation or the most expensive type of burial. Our paychecks are going to be exactly the same. There is zero commission on an at-need type of a situation. So I like to share that. Here's a funny one here. Funeral directors sleep in a suit. Funeral directors sleep in a suit. Now, I can promise you, if there is a death that happens at home or at Lewis Gale Hospital or Carilion or wherever it might be, I can promise you that if I'm the one that's on call, this is how I'm going to be dressed. Even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter. It's interesting that the funeral industry has not changed as far as dress code goes. This is still the standard and the expectation, really, of where the society is. And I can put a suit on in the dark in about 5 minutes. I do that out of respect to my wife, so I don't turn the lights on and so forth. But it's true. Many people think we sleep in a suit. We don't, but we're going to show up to your place looking professional in the way that you want us to. Another misconception is that we sew eyes and mouths shut. People think that we do that, and that is not true. We do have a closure mechanism that we use. It does not involve a needle and thread to keep your eyes shut or your mouth shut. That's probably something that took place way back in the day, historically speaking, with funeral service, but I can tell you that is not how it is done. Another myth here, funeral directors do not need pants and certainly do not need underclothes when dressing a body. That is not true. I had a family one time that came in. They brought their clothing. It was hanging up on the coat rack, the clothing rack in the arrangement room, and we started to address the clothing, and I didn't see any pants. And I asked, I said, well, what about the pants? And they just felt like you wouldn't see the pants because the casket was going to be closed on the lower half. Well, that's not the case. We got pants for those folks. We do use everything that you would normally wear, underclothes and everything. We want all of the clothing. Another myth, funeral directors tie bodies down in caskets just because they sit up. That is not the case. I have never one time ever in 20 years ever seen a dead body sit up in the casket. I don't know where those stories come from. I don't know, but we do not tie anybody down into a casket to keep them coming up. Just a couple of more here. Funeral directors turn the answering machine on at the end of the day. I can promise you, if you call our funeral home and most every other funeral home in the country, you are not going to get an answering machine when you call. You're going to get a live person, a staff person. When you call our funeral home, we care about the people that we serve and we wait on. And for us, as many funeral homes in the valley are, it's important that you connect with a person that is right there with the funeral home. You're not going to get an answering machine. If you call at 2 o'clock in the morning and you want to know the arrangements for somebody, we're going to answer the phone and we're going to have that conversation with you at 2 o'clock. We'd rather that wait maybe until 8 o'clock in the morning, but we are going to answer. We're going to answer it. Funeral directors objectify. This is a little more of a serious one, I guess. Funeral directors emotionally, we deal with a lot of different things. We deal with a lot of types of death, a lot of different types of personalities, a lot of different family dynamics, a lot of financial situations, different ages of deaths. There's just a lot. And I think oftentimes there are folks that feel like we objectify things and we lose all sensitivity of death and of serving families. And that's not what it is. We do have somehow a God-given ability to separate sometimes the emotion from what we are doing. When someone dies, that family is entrusting very, very meaningful and precious items to us and people to us. It's important that we stay strong enough emotionally and mentally to be able to undertake all of those things. They don't need somebody cracking emotionally. So we do have to maintain a certain strength, but that does not mean that we don't feel it. And we do oftentimes. And there have been many, many times in my career when I've had to just kind of take a deep breath, pull myself back just a little bit and regain my composure, because emotionally I'm either a little too close to the situation, or maybe I'm imagining that it's my daughter or son that's passed away, or one of my parents that's passed away. We got to remain strong and keep pushing through. And the last one that I have here, this is kind of a given, but funeral directors are perfect. That is a myth. It is not true. We do our best. We understand and we accept the responsibility and the expectation that we get one chance at this. We get one chance at making the body look presentable. We get one chance at making sure that the song is played correctly. We get one chance that the air conditioning is working in the visitation room. We get one chance. That's it. But we are not perfect. And there are times when we fail. There are times when we make mistakes. There are times when we forget things. And so we do ask for grace in that regard. But we are not perfect. We try hard. Our standard is very high. Every single day almost it comes out of my mouth to pursue excellence with our staff. And I'm representing, again, funeral industry in general, not just us. I think the funeral industry, funeral service in general, we all are doing our best to pursue excellence the best way that we can. So those are some funeral myths I thought would be good to share. So Gary, any questions or any summary with this? Any final thought?
Well, now, how many years you been in this funeral business?
I've been in the funeral service for just a little over 20 years.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
That's exactly fine.
Out of those many years you've been, what's the one biggest thing that you think people need to know? The one biggest thing.
I would say the biggest thing would be to spend some time thinking of your own arrangements. Don't take the chance that your significant other is going to know. And certainly don't let it be open to where you are basically requiring somebody to guess what it is that your wishes and preferences are. But do some thinking for yourself. Be responsible with that. It doesn't mean you have to plan every single thing out. It doesn't mean you have to even talk to a funeral director, but write some things down. Think through yourself what it is that you want so that you're not leaving it for somebody else.
So in other words, you're saying the more information you have, the better it will go for the family.
Absolutely. I have never, ever had a family that had done some prearranging. I've never had a family say that they regretted prearranging, ever. But I've had many, many, many families wish that their loved one would have planned. So, absolutely.
Yeah, that's one big thing that I know that when I help families to get them to you or to whatever funeral home they're going to go to, that they always look at me and say, I've never done this before. What am I supposed to do? What's next? And they never talk to the loved one that passed away, and they're just in the total dark. And then it ends up in a division in the family because this side of the family wanted to do it this way, the other side of the family wanted to do it this way. And all that can be prevented.
Yeah, absolutely. And funeral directors, maybe this should be another myth. Funeral directors are referees. We are not referees. Sometimes we have to slip in there, but we can't take sides. you know, and there are times when, unfortunately, I've had to do this, just excuse myself from the arrangement room for a few moments until they kind of talk things out. And when they're ready, I can slip back in and then continue on. It can be difficult sometimes. The stress level is already high. It's already high, but it can be, so much of that can be extinguished or at least diminished by just spending some time thinking through some of these issues.
And then the last question I have for you, with all the things that are going on right now in the world with the shortage of this, and this, are y'all falling in any category, the shortage of maybe something that y'all use, or where are y'all at with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have seen some shortages with some merchandise. There have been some casket manufacturers that have had to discontinue a certain product maybe because of maybe that they can't get what they need to manufacture the casket. So there have been some things. There's always ways to make substitutions with that. So there's always a way to kind of go around that. But I'll tell you the real shortage, and this is honestly the truth, it's personnel. It's finding staff. We are short-staffed as it is, and I'm not just talking about funeral directors, although we are short on funeral directors now. We're short on people that can just work funerals, work in the parking lot, or greet people at the guest book, or run death certificates here and there, and those types of things. It's a real challenge because you can't just take anybody to work at the funeral home. It takes a special kind of person that's got some gifts and some abilities.
These lights went out on you.
I see that.
That we have motion detectors, and
we weren't moving around enough. Maybe we just should have gotten up and moved around a little more.
Yeah.
So, but that would be the main shortage, is personnel, and I think that's widespread all over, not just in the funeral service, but it's everywhere. It's in restaurants, and it's resorts that people go to, and you may be experiencing some of the same things here.
Definitely. Definitely.
There is a shortage for sure.
Well, David, I really appreciate Dave. Dave's the general manager at John M. Oakey in Salem, and I know that he's available, or anyone of their staff's available if you need to make a phone call, if you want to do a pre-arrangement. All funeral homes are. So we're not just really pointing our finger at anyone, but I just want to thank you for your time this last month that we've been together, and you have shared tremendous information. And I hope that it's helped you, viewers, to really understand the needs that you need to consider. And as you consider these needs, if you need help from this chaplain department or to Dave, we'll be glad to help you in any way we can, because this is important. And I like what Dave said just a minute ago. It's a one-time shot. Yeah. Whatever you decide to do, that's what you decide to do, and that's what's going to be carried out to the best of our ability, of the funeral home's ability, of the chaplain or the pastor, whoever pastor you have speak at the funeral or the service. We do it to the best of our ability, but you need to be happy too. And I've heard this so many times that a loved one will walk away and wish I'd have done more. And that was lack of preparation, lack of knowledge, lack of not knowing what to do. So please, and this was one thing that from my heart that I talked to Dave about before we even started this information, to understand how important this is. So please carry on and make sure you understand what you want or your loved one wants or whoever it may be, but just help everybody, each other through this process. It's very important. So we appreciate you, Dave. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I thank you, the audience, for tuning in. And we're going to turn off the air and open up for some questions if we have any questions. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much.